Good morning, everyone. This is a meeting on April 8th, 2021 at 9 o'clock in the morning. And this is a joint meeting between the Senate Agriculture Committee and the House Agriculture and Forestry Committees. And we are going to be talking about the Vermont Technical College, which we know is so important to agriculture, and the revisioned Agriculture and Food Systems program. So we have a number of wonderful guests today. And our first witness is Pat Moulton, who is the president of VTC. Pat, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us what's going on? We're really interested to hear.
Great. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Representative Partridge and Senator Starr and committee members for agreeing to meet with us in a joint session today. It's very much appreciated. We know your time is valuable, so we appreciate you taking the time to hear us. And with me today are some names hopefully many of you know, including Ellen Kaler, who is the Executive Director of the Vermont Sustainable Jobs Fund, and her organization is the author of the latest plan regarding farm to plate, upon which we are building in terms of information. Also with us is Regina Beidler and Louise Calderwood. These are ladies who are co-chairing a completely voluntary effort for us here at Vermont Tech, with Ellen providing expertise and facilitation and knowledge. And these ladies have been working for 9 months with a group of 40 volunteers, you'll hear more about in a minute, to really look at how can we revision the Agriculture and Food Systems program here at Vermont Tech. We've been seeing declining enrollment in our dairy programs. We know there's a changing in structure of agriculture and not just dairy, but other aspects of agriculture in Vermont. And so we've spent the last 9 months really trying to vision what is the niche for Vermont Tech? What is the niche that's going to help educate the next century of farm and ag-related and food service employees and managers in the state? So that's the effort. We have a PowerPoint we'd like to run through with you today, which Regina will kick off for us here in a minute. Between Regina and Louise, you'll dive into some of these details. We hope to have about a 25-minute to half-hour presentation, then open it up for questions. And if that's okay with you, Representative Partridge and Senator Starr, we'll take right off.
Yep, sounds good.
Perfect. Okay, and I believe, Regina, you have got ability to screen share. So, Regina, I've not done you justice in terms of your work with Organic Valley, and I apologize for that. And Louise, your work. So go ahead and give yourself another brief introduction if you'd like.
Thank you so much. I'll just introduce myself for a moment and then pass to Louise, who I'm sure is well known to many of you as well. My husband Brent and I live in Randolph Center. For many years, we were organic dairy producers for Organic Valley, and now I work for Organic Valley as their member program specialist, working around education content from our cooperative. And I've been the co-chair in this process with Louise, which has been a pleasure. So Louise, do you want to say hello as well?
And
Whoops, I'm not.
I'm based in Cascade, Vermont. I'm a major show producer there. You folks have also seen me in front of your committee as my role of the Director of Regulatory Affairs for the American.
Louise,
We've got a lot of background noise when you're speaking.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's.
Okay, I'll take care of that when we get live for the presentation. Let's just go ahead and roll in, and I'll take care of it.
Okay, great. Thanks, Louise. All right, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. As Pat said, we're going to start by having just a presentation to walk you through some of the pieces of what we've been working on. And just a moment, I've got to find the piece I'm looking for. Okay. So this morning, what we're going to be walking you through is a bit about why we are doing the work that we're doing at Vermont Technical College and the process that Pat was describing, a bit of our process to date and how we've gotten to where we are, some final recommendations that have come out of this process, some identified interim steps, some suggestions of how you could possibly help, and also at that point then opening it back up for your questions and comments, which we really look forward to. So a question of why are we doing this? The impetus for the start of this project was the threatened closure of the VTC Randolph campus last year. However, declining enrollment over a number of years has been a significant threat to the long-term sustainability of this program. You'll see that it's not only 2020, which obviously during the pandemic year had a very significant impact on enrollment, but even in the years prior, you'll see a marked decline coming down from 2016 to the present. We also are seeing that the Vermont State Colleges merger necessitates a really clear path forward in order for this program to survive. And this slide shows the impact of those declining student numbers. At the top of this slide, you'll see operational cost, and that's all the costs related to the agriculture program, including the farm, which is the program laboratory. So the low number of students at this point, which are 27,
Regina, you're off mute.
I am off mute?
Now you're okay.
Okay, just making sure. Okay, so just showing that the per cost student is significantly higher than some of these others that are detailed beside it, with right now the per cost student being close to $13,000 per student. And the bottom slide shows the financial deficits on the campus farm, taking into account the expenses after the sale of milk, maple syrup, and apples. And you're going to hear more specifics about this a little later from Louise in this presentation. But the most significant impact of these numbers isn't the function of herd management, but rather the reality of running a dairy farm using union labor. I'm sorry, my slides are not, okay, there we go. What we're seeing is that this is contrasted against a rapidly growing local and regional food system with a wider expanse of job opportunities and more specific training needs for the current and future labor force. And you certainly will be aware in your committees of these dynamics through the information that you've been hearing through Farm to Plate. So one of the questions that we asked during this process is, with the understanding that the food system is bigger than production agriculture, is Vermont Tech going to focus solely on production ag education and training, or can we also focus on other aspects of the food system? So we'll spend a few moments walking you through some of the people and the process that we went through to get to the recommendations that we'll show you. As Pat mentioned, we had more than 40 people volunteer to be subject matter experts and working together with the faculty and staff to identify the real strengths of this program, as well as a path forward that's responsive to the changing food system that we've just mentioned. This included a significant number of listening sessions from a number of groups in the food system, including current and former faculty and staff and community members, and a number of different production groups within agriculture as well. You'll see some of them listed here in beef, goats, dairy heifer grazers, and some value-added businesses. One specific listening session that I'll call out is we gathered a group of recent 2+2 students who had just left VTC and are now at UVM. And we got to ask them about what drew them to Vermont Tech and the strengths and future opportunities that they saw in the agriculture program. And that was really interesting to have very recent students be able to reflect on that. We also had a specific team working in our group developing and sending out a survey that was sent out to a diverse group of stakeholders, including, as you'll see, alumni, community members, and food system people. And we had 191 respondents. And this was really important to us because we didn't want this project to happen in a vacuum, but very much to be driven by the expertise and also the observations of those who are connected to the program at Vermont Tech. Pat and Louise and Ellen and I are what we are calling the leadership team, and that's a group of us that have been meeting weekly since May of 2020. We meet for an hour and a half every Tuesday morning, both to keep an eye on the current process and to always be looking ahead to what the next steps are going to be. So that's been consistent through the course of this process since last spring. We've also been really very lucky to have a very diverse steering committee that draws from across a wide cross-section of Vermont agriculture and education, and that meets monthly. So again, you'll probably see some very familiar names on that list. The survey that I just mentioned a few minutes ago was led by Eric Campbell from Bernie Sanders' office, and again was very important in getting that feedback from our stakeholders. And then we had 4 other teams that we've developed over the course of this process. The first one, Program Models, started their work late last summer and in the early fall. And that group, led by Philip Ackerman-Leist, was looking at surveying other existing ag programs across the country for ideas of what other people were doing, and then identifying flexible elements and delivery modalities that we think reflect the needs of current students and the food system. We also had a culture and curriculum team that started their work at the same time. That was led by Mark Mahaly, who's a former dean and president of Vermont Law School. And that team looked at identifying the knowledge and competencies that are needed for success in today's food system, and then reviewing the current curriculum at Vermont Tech for gaps, and coordinating with the program model team around delivery modalities. And a subgroup of that team is the dairy subcommittee. We felt like the longstanding importance of dairy and future producer education, not only at Vermont Tech, but for the whole state, was really important to call out. And so gathered a group of diverse dairy producers from across different sizes, different types, goat dairy and cow dairy, to come together to have discussions. And that group focused very much on identifying what are the essential knowledge pieces that need to be in place for someone to succeed at dairy. Where does that education happen? Is it in the classroom? Is it on the campus farm? Is it on other people's farms? And how does that education support the needs of the food system? The business case team was led by Jed Davis from Cabot, and arguably had the heaviest lift because they took the recommendations from the first 2 teams' work and applied financial scrutiny to them. So in the course of their work, which began early this year, they have reviewed the existing conditions, financial conditions in the program, looked at current performance. They've proposed some transformation, have set some performance expectations and some expected results, as well as some identifiable gaps for long-term financial viability of the program. And the final team we'll call out, led by Kate Finley Woodruff, who's is the dean up at the College for Ag and Life Sciences at UVM, is a communication and outreach team. And this team is working on articulating what would be the promise and delivery of what students would receive from the program that's being recommended, and developing clear messages for those who are hearing what this program is about that also aligns with the larger marketing and messaging from the college. So with that, we're going to walk you through the large recommendations that came out of this process, knowing that there'll be opportunities to answer more questions as we get to the end of this presentation. The first recommendation was to create a Center for Agriculture and Food Entrepreneurship. The sense behind the idea of a center is it's an easily identifiable and marketable portal for prospective students to see a variety of available learning options. And if you look at the center of this graphic, we've been able to place advising at the very center of the learning process. So as individual students come in, they're advised in being able to meet their individual learning and professional goals. And at the same time, having the center also allows the ability to have a close connection to the activity that's happening in the classroom and on the farm. And then on the right side of the graphic, also to work very closely with the continuing education and workforce development department at the college, and also with other majors and concentrations at the college, because as we know, beyond production agriculture, there's lots of places in the food system that require business or manufacturing or technical skills that could be met by some of those other majors. We also felt like the center, I'll add one more piece to that before moving on, and would be able to strategically market, implement and assess and continually enhance a suite of programs. So the one thing that we heard very clearly was it would be really nice to have a champion who would be connected to that center, who could really be a clear communicator and a representative for what's being offered in the program. This slide is showing a recommendation showing that we know that there's a value in a core curriculum that allows flexibility in learning for those individual students that we were talking about. What we discovered when we looked at the existing associate's degrees, which right now the two associate's degrees are agribusiness management and dairy herd management, that when you look at the specific courses that are offered in those two areas, there's significant overlap in those areas. So there was a recommendation to have one associate's degree that would allow for additional focus areas that answer worker needs in the growing food system. So if you look at the sandwich board on the right, there would be a core curriculum for the associates allowing for either a continued dairy and animal science concentration, which is currently available, or also an opportunity for those interested in food entrepreneurship or some other piece of the food system to have an opportunity to get their associates as well. And we also see the value and the strength of maintaining the current bachelor's degree in diversified agriculture and the 2+2 program, which is a really important part of Vermont Tech's offerings and their partnership with UVM. We wanted to go a step further and say, if that was the recommendation, what could that look like around the specifics? Would it still meet the educational requirements that the college has for every graduate? So this first slide shows that the top is the general education requirements that are required for every student that's at Vermont Technical College, and that adds up to the 20 credits. Below that, on the bottom of the slide, is what we see as core courses, no matter what your concentration, that would be of value to you if you are a college student in the agriculture degree program. And I'll point out the next to the last bullet in that bottom box is internships, and we'll talk about that more specifically in a couple of slides. But again, these are courses we think would be beneficial to everyone. Then there would be the opportunity to go into one of these two concentrations. And this is meant as really an example or a proposal. This is certainly nothing that's set in stone, but just showing a way, again, that the needs of those particular students, depending on their concentration, could be met, and at the same time meet the graduation requirements that are in place for Vermont Technical College. And of course, something that we don't want to forget is that the existing program and curriculum in particular is really very strong. So we're not looking at significant changes in the types of courses that will be offered, that there's already a lot of these pieces that we've identified that are already in the curriculum. So it'd just be a matter of looking at how those courses are offered and what they would be able to offer students and what their goals would be. And again, I'll just mention including the 2+2 program, which is very important. We see the opportunity to expand the existing number of students and their learning styles by increasing the type and number of short courses, certificates, and also offering additional online and hybrid learning options. I think the kinds of options that are available is not just something that Vermont Tech is thinking about, but all of education is looking at, particularly after this pandemic year. We also see the opportunity for J-term and summer programs to allow students the chance to learn in areas that aren't covered in the regular curriculum and could also take advantage of the growing season when a lot of agricultural activity happens. We're going to go back to looking at the internship that I mentioned a few minutes ago. Applied education has been a hallmark of Vermont Tech for many, many years. And what we would like to recommend is that this be reinforced by introducing 15 credits of internship experience spread over the 4 semesters of the associate's degree. So the first year would focus on growing basic farm and food production skills with the help of the campus farm, and also resume and interview experience skills. And it's our understanding that this is already an important part of the curriculum that's offered at Vermont Tech. So that would be the focus for the first year. The second year would allow placement of students into internships with a focus on their area of interest, whether that's in production agriculture or in some part of manufacturing or the food system, and would recommend that it include a project of interest that would be beneficial to the student's mentor in the final semester. All of this learning described in these recommendations benefits from a more diverse array of on-farm experiences at the campus farm. And this knowledge, along with the significant annual financial deficits at the farm, have led us to the recommendation of selling the dairy milking herd and substituting in 6 other enterprises, which we've called out in this slide. That would be a beef herd, some custom dairy heifer grazing, the deep bedded hogs, vegetable production, and maintaining the current maple and apple orchard. And this doesn't mean that dairy education will disappear, as both the coursework and the ability to work with non-lactating cows will continue to exist at the campus farm, but it would mean relying on partnerships with area farms that would help to fill in some of those additional skill development that wouldn't be able to happen around a milking herd. And I'll just say too that the 2+2 focus group spoke positively about the interactions that they were able to have with local farms, because their comment was that it gave real life perspectives that were really hard to get on a campus farm. So already seeing the benefit of partnering with farms in the area. And if adopted, this new program would require some rebranding and an expansioning of marketing approaches to significantly grow student enrollment. So I just offer this as a sample of what some of the marketing could look like. It calls out the Center for Agriculture and Food Entrepreneurship that I mentioned earlier, and also shows a greater diversity of focus areas that a student might be able to learn if they come to Vermont Tech. And with that, I'm going to hand things over to Louise, who's going to take you through some more of the numbers.
Regina. So Regina laid out all of these wonderful ideas and vision for how can we reshape and tweak some things at Vermont Tech to meet the future of agriculture in Vermont. But as we all know, in order to do that, the numbers have to work. So looking at this slide, starting in the bright yellow on the far left of your screen, you'll see what we're calling scenario 1. And this is the status quo. So if you go all the way over to the left, you'll see a revenue line. And that revenue line are all the sources of income for the ag program at Vermont Tech. So this is student enrollment, it's the sale of milk and beef and apples and maple, it's the Ag Institute, any source of revenue. Likewise, the expense line represents all of those expenses needed to maintain any of those either educational or operational components of the ag program. And you can see that today, under the status quo and the current number of 22 enrolled students, that the net revenue is in the red. Now, the next line I want to really explain to you, that's the margin. And you can see here the margin in the bright yellow column is minus 18%. What the margin represents is what does the student enrollment, what does the program in general contribute to the entire school? So we recognize we have the need for the academic, but there's also the need to keep the student health center going, the student educational, or student athletic center going, to keep, frankly, the president's office operational. And so in order to achieve all of those needs, the margin that's essential for an educational program to contribute to the entire college is 74%. So if you look at the margin line and move across each of those scenarios, you'll see that we have maintained a 74% margin for each of the scenarios that we are suggesting. So the next column in the bright orange shows the break even. That basically says if we were to keep the dairy herd, we were to keep the existing number of faculty and staff, how many students would be needed to take this from a minus 18% to a 74% margin? And you can see it would require growing the student number from the current 22 students to 135 students. So then and quite frankly, the fact that there's 22 students there and we have the dropping enrollment really speaks to the need for some changes.
Well, and yes, Louise, just one thing. Oops. The expense line does increase with the 135 students to reflect the additional faculty needed to teach those 135 students.
Thank you. Thank you,
Okay.
Pat. Yeah, that is a good point, is that there's the additional revenue from the students, but we're maintaining the same student to faculty ratio to bring that faculty number up. So then we looked at a couple of different scenarios. We said, well, what happens if we revise the enterprises as Regina had suggested, but we didn't create the center? What would be needed then? What would be the break even in that case? Well, in that case, the student enrollment would need to grow to 77 students to maintain the 74% margin. And that seemed like a difficult piece, that if we're going to revise the enterprises and really need to grow the student enrollment, it seemed to us on the business case team that it was really essential to go ahead and create the center. Remember, the center is going to support those internships, the opportunity for students to have employment opportunities on farms that really reflect their choice of future enrollment, their future employment. Throughout the 2+2 interviews, throughout all of the case studies that we've done, we've heard how important those internships are to the students. So scenario 3 includes the center. It includes a staff person for the center and marketing for the center. And you can see that for scenario 3, to maintain that 74% margin, it does require 125 students. If you can go ahead and move to the next slide for me, Regina. Just to give you an idea of what the new enterprises will look like from a financial perspective, we considered a feeder beef operation, as Regina mentioned, the grazing, contract raised dairy heifers, feeder pigs, potatoes, maple in the orchard. And you can see that when we look at these enterprises, including the labor needed to run the enterprises, this indeed still has an $86,000 draw at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, that number in the bright yellow block. So this is essentially the cost of maintaining this lab for the campus, recognizing that through the dairy sub-team, it became very clear to us that there is the need for students to gain some key skills on campus, and that these skills are essential for them as they move on into their internship opportunities in their second year at the college. But this bright yellow box of minus 86,000 is in direct contrast to the current cost, which is about a $250,000 loss per year for the current dairy, maple, and orchard at the college. So what are some of the challenges? Well, in the big picture, we've got to focus on teaching out the current students and the current majors, but we've got the place to do that. The mechanisms are in place within the academic leadership at the college to address that. And we also know that we need to focus on fundraising. We've got some heavy lifting to do here, and we recognize not only is there the fundraising, but at every step along the way, we need to be ready to make some decisions. Is this idea, is this proposal that's being rolled out truly going to meet the required steady state of a return of 74% margin of enrollment from students who find the value to this, and for meeting the future needs of Vermont agriculture? So what are some of the interim steps that we'll need to go through to reach this steady state? Well, we've got some short-term pieces that we need to look towards. For the next year, we're proposing of hiring some short-term, independent, part-time contractors. And this is to bring some additional staffing capacity. This capacity will focus on signing up farms and food systems. Those are for the semesters of off-campus internship learning, and also for additional hands-on opportunity for students who have interest beyond the 6 production mechanisms that we're suggesting for on-campus. These contractors would also assist with the existing continuing education workforce development offerings to help increase the number of short courses, enrollment in those courses, and very importantly, assuming that funding is recognized and available, would be to set up a meat cutting lab and a program. We know that there's job opportunities for this, and this would bring some additional capacity to campus to help with that. These contractors would assist Molly Willard with the short course development. They would assist Dr. Crow, the current VTC faculty member, in providing feedback as she moves to rework the curriculum and move it through the internal VTC process. These contractors would also be available to help Steph Nault, the current farm manager, as she moves forward with the changes at the farm that will be needed to accommodate the new ag enterprises. We know that fundraising is a huge piece of this, so some additional contract employment to focus on the fundraising needs. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, is to really focus on increasing the enrollment and working on the rebranding and rebuilding of the overall program and marketing back. This isn't the first time Vermont Tech has been here before. Actually, in the late 1950s, it was proposed to close the campus. The governor's address actually stated that we still need trained young men, sign of the times, on our farms, but we also need trained workers in industry. And in the governor's address, he mentioned that the School of Agriculture should be closed. Well, it didn't happen. The School of Agriculture was rebranded, was revisioned, was rebuilt. It grew. I know many of you are graduates of this program, as are other family members and other people you've worked with throughout your careers. We know how important the School of Agriculture is to the state of Vermont. It's our job to rebrand, repurpose, and move it forward. So, how can you help? What do we need? What are we asking for? Frankly, we're asking for you to advocate for this program's transformation overall, and that includes funding for the meat lab. It also means that recognizing that in any workforce-related bills, Vermont Tech plays a key role in workforce development. Continued support for the overall transformation within the state college system is essential. We know you folks have been focused on this, and we really appreciate that. And then the fact that you're engaged and active throughout your communities, that you know families who have juniors and seniors in high school that are considering their future employment, their future education, make certain to encourage Vermont Tech and enrollment at Vermont Tech. And then finally, if you have any questions after our question and answer period today, any of the four of us are more than willing to take those answers. And here we say, go ahead and email, but obviously phone calls work as well. Just really feel comfortable to reach out for us for any additional ideas you have, for any additional questions you have after today's presentation. So there we are. At this point, we're ready to open it up for discussion and take your questions.
Well, thank you all for a really clear, concise presentation. Really appreciate that. And committees, I'm wondering if you have any questions. Vicki, go ahead.
Oh dear, I'm sorry to start us off, but I really get excited hearing about all this innovation. That's wonderful. Thank you so much, all of you. My question is, and Louise, went at the end of the presentation, you said seniors and juniors reaching out. What about folks in their 30s, 40s? They're like, yeah, I really want to get into this new area. How do we help them? You know, if they're living at home, they have a family, they have an hour commute or more. Will there be online things available, or how are you innovating in that area for that kind of age group? Anyone older than, you know, let's say 25, 30, 40, that kind of thing.
Absolutely, Vicki. And that's something that we heard, not just from you, we've heard it throughout the process. And so in all of the narrative that we are developing for this, we are realizing that for folks who might want to change their careers, or even people who realize that they're already in business, but they need some additional education, there will be opportunities for that. And those will be provided in a number of ways, certainly through the short courses, but then also as we're all learning, our hybrid methods of education will be adapted and available there as well. So we view the education here as not just the traditional age, but people of any age who recognize the value of education through Vermont Tech.
And Pat, my suspicion is that this past year you've learned a lot about that. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to add that if there's a silver lining in COVID, it's that a lot of our faculty have come to recognize that the remote learning is an option, and we can do it, and we can do it well. We're doing it better this year than we did it last spring. We're doing it better this spring, et cetera. And it is part of the entire transformation for Vermont Tech, is to focus at continuing to provide a traditional residential experience, but opening up to more remote delivery, options for low residency, where students might come to campus a weekend, a week, whatever the case might be, so that our programming can get opened up to those working adults, the non-traditional student who cannot drop everything for 2 years or a year to come to campus and go to school. I mean, we're arguably a little bit behind the curve in that with some of our sisters even in the Vermont State College systems, but that's because in part of our intense applied hands-on aspect. So we need that lecture lab sequence, but there's lots of different ways to do that. But I think your point is right on, Representative Strong. And I think a lot of, well, young people, a lot younger than I, 20, 30s, 40 somethings are start thinking, I want to get into this field. I want to get into the food system, adding, growing crops, et cetera, value added, and we need to provide those opportunities. So absolutely, that's an element of the programming going forward.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Bobby, go ahead. You're muted, Bobby.
Probably I should have stayed that way, but anyways, thank you for your work you put in regards to this. But I sort of have some serious problems with your end plan, and I don't know how much research you did in the dairy industry, but we retain right now, we're retaining well over 50% of our milk right here in Vermont to be used here making cheeses, ice creams, yogurts, fluid milk. And I haven't given up on the dairy industry, and it sounds like you guys are kind of right on the verge. UVM sold their cows, basically. They gave them away, and they've got the cream program left, but that's out-of-state students for the most part that take up the cream program and utilize their $2 or $3 million barn that they've got. But your problem is lack of students and low pricing in milk. So how much effort did you put into trying to raise the price of milk and trying to raise your enrollment numbers by working with our high schools to try to get more students coming to VTC? So those are two big questions. And the other thing, if we lose the dairy industry, it isn't just the dairy industry that we lose. We lose all the infrastructure because Brian Carpenter isn't going to keep a bunch of tractors around to plow 2 or 3 acres of ground to plant carrots or potatoes or whatever in. And so then we're going to lose, unless we want to truck the milk in from New York, which I guess we don't mind doing, but we're going to lose our ice cream business, our cheese business, and yogurt business. So I think we've got an awful lot that we're going to lose to, the couple $100,000 that you lose a year is a small price to pay for what we could lose if we lose the whole dairy industry. And at the rate we're going, that's the way it's going to end up.
Well, thank you for that. And first of all, I would apologize if in any way we felt, if we represented in a way that made it seem as if we were giving up as on the dairy industry. And, as somebody who has been a dairy farmer for many years, Louise also, that's something that we were taking very, very seriously. So I will say that if you look at the curriculum, there's still going to be a very strong dairy program. An interesting conversation that happened in that dairy subgroup that we mentioned is they identified what are the essential skills and knowledge that you need to have in order to be a successful dairy producer. And then where do we learn those skills? And so if you look at the enterprises that we're suggesting take the place of the milking herd at VTC, there would still be the opportunity to learn a lot of those kinds of dairy or bovine handling and management skills, except for milking. And that's the piece that when we talked with that subgroup, they said that's the piece that you can learn from other farmers or you can learn in other settings. But the base knowledge of what you need to be a producer or a dairy producer successfully would still come very strongly through the program. And the other thing I'll just put in as editorially a little bit is my husband was an adjunct for 3 of the last 5 years at the ag program at VTC. So we had a lot of chances to not only interact with students in the classroom, but have them down to our farm for conversations. And what we're seeing in a lot of the traditional Vermont farms is farms that already have a number of family members relying on the dairy milk check to pay their salaries, not necessarily always a place for that next student to come back to the farm, even if they wish to. So there was a lot of conversations with that group about if we have to bring in some diversified income streams, what would it be like if we had a few beef animals? What would it be like if we had a flour enterprise? What would it be like if we did something else that would add to the income stream that might add to the sustainability of some of these dairy operations in the state who can't absorb all of the family members who want to come back? So I would offer that just as a perspective that we're not at all giving up on dairy, that we see the importance to the state, but also see the ability to draw in a more diverse group of students if we offer additional ways that people can interact with the program and the food system.
I would just also add.
Also, if I could, Pat,
Go ahead.
and then I'll let you wrap up here. But as Bobby knows, and I've been away from Vermont for 2 years, so I may not be familiar to some of you folks, but for 8 years, I was a regional dairy specialist with Extension. My husband and I owned a 300-head dairy farm. I was Vermont's Deputy Secretary of Agriculture for 8 years. My license plate was bovine. So dairy is my background, dairy is my blood, dairy is my love. When we revisioned the enterprises at Vermont Tech, it specifically is to support dairy. Some of the feedback that we received from students was that the current facilities didn't meet with their needs for modern dairy operations. Also, as Regina mentioned in the dairy subgroup, we have organic dairy, grass-based dairy, 2,000 head dairy. We have so many different forms of dairy. And that's why we're really focusing on the internship to give the students the opportunity to get the hands-on experiences at the dairy farms that are of interest to them for their ongoing career. As Regina mentioned, the enterprises were selected because they will give the students the skills they need. And I'm going to go on mute. I hear I've got, oh no, it went away. The enterprises that were selected are to give the students the hands-on skills that they need to then move on into their enterprise setting, where they'll have 2 different opportunities to work with 2 different businesses that will be reflective of their future career goals.
Thank you, Louise and Regina. And certainly it is clearly not our intent nor plan to abandon the dairy program. Quite the opposite, is to try to reinvigorate it in a different way, in part because we do have to make a pretty major investment on our farm if we're going to continue to operate our dairy herd. Our farm is old. The barn needs significant work. We're looking at probably a $3 to $5 or plus $1 million investment into the facility itself to bring it up to speed. As Louise mentioned and Regina mentioned, we don't have many of the things that, I mean, students are coming off family farms that are in better shape, have robotics, have other factors that we don't have here. So we need to make that investment if we're going to maintain the milking herd. Second is exactly to Louise's and Regina's point, is getting that experience of other farms through internship opportunities is so that they have the exposure that they won't get here. And to your question about working with high schools, absolutely, we've been doing that forever, and trying to build pathways from career centers from high schools. You know, there are fewer family farms in Vermont, and family farm students have been our bread and butter. And the bread and butter pool is shrinking. It's the demographic challenge we're all dealing with. So how can we add that diversity that's going to attract folks potentially from out of state, continue to attract our dairy farm families, continue to attract others that want to go into dairy agriculture, but also provide a more diversified experience. And, you know, I'm hearing you on the $200,000, but it's a lot to lose when you're trying to sustain facilities, labs, scholarships, and everything. And, you know, I won't add, but we don't get a lot of support from the state. This program is not subsidized by the state. We just can't afford to continue to operate programs that are losing this much money. So that the intent is to pivot to something that's going to be more financially sustainable and attractive to students, but not
Right.
to lose the dairy. Right.
Okay, Bobby, do you have a follow-up? I have 3 hands up, so we have about 15 minutes left. I want to make sure we get everybody in.
Well, I've got my hand up and I still don't agree with what the responses were. There was no response on helping to get the price of milk up, very little response on why our students are going over to New York to college, down to New Hampshire to college, and not coming to our own colleges. But anyways, and Pat, I really take offense to the state not putting money in. We put millions and millions in just last year, and another 50 odd million this year's coming. I think we're catching up to a great extent on helping out.
Oh,
but
no question. Absolutely. And no offense intended, but it's been arguably, decades to get to this point. So yes, extremely appreciative of what's been happening now. It's just the question of sustainability. And to your point on milk, we're in the education business. I don't know how we go about working to get milk prices up. So I'd be happy to go to school with you on that, Senator, on how does a college do that? Secondly, I would say that, why do students go out of school? Our tuition is not cheap. And our tuition is not cheap in part because of the historical lack of support for the state colleges. When we have 17% of our budget become from the public, it forces everything onto the tuition. And for us to maintain this farm and maintain the program, we're essentially asking the other students at the college to subsidize the ag program. And if that's the decision that the Board of Trustees chooses to make, then I support that. But the pressure that I see from me and for this institution, particularly as we go forward with the transformation of the state colleges, is looking at these small, low enrolled programs that cost a lot of money and figuring out how we rework them or making them go away. And before we put a knife in this program, I want to have unturned every possible stone to figure out how we can make it successful and keep it, because I believe in our 150-year history in dairy education and agriculture education, and I want to keep it. But I'm struggling with how to do that in the current environment, frankly. So I'd happily have a chat with you, Senator, offline about what can we do on the milk price question, because I will admit I'm ignorant in that area.
All right, thank you, Pat. I'm going to call on the folks who have their hands up. So Brian is first, and then John, and then Chris Pearson. So Brian, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the presentation talked a lot about rebranding, and I'm curious what exactly might be in the works for that. I'll just mention that in my district, Castleton, which was a state college at one time, Castleton State College became Castleton University when David Walk was the president, and has spent considerable effort, money, and time in branding itself. There's a bill that's just been introduced in the Senate that will withhold funding for the state college system if each individual institution is not allowed to continue to market and brand themselves the way they are. So I'm curious how VTC is going to rebrand itself.
Senator, you're referring to the college in its entirety, or are you referring to the ag program?
Well, either way, I guess, Pat.
Okay. Well, we haven't gotten there yet on the how the college in its entirety. I mean, our brand is pretty sound now. We have a brand as a small, caring community that achieves results, hand-on applied learning, 99% placement. You can get a job when you graduate from Vermont Tech. That's our current brand, and we don't want to lose that. No more than Castleton wants to lose its brand. No more than NVU wants to lose its brand. So, we're trying to figure out how in this new university setting do we maintain those pieces that are critical to each individual campus, yet put a value proposition out there that's going to attract and maintain our current student enrollment and attract new ones. To the ag program, we have had a communications team that's been working on it, and I would defer to either Louise or Regina on that, but they too, I mean, the cafe concept, the Center for Agriculture and Food Entrepreneurship, really focused on entrepreneurship, focused on ag systems, focused on food systems, is really the direction we're headed in. Maintaining that Vermont Tech is the special brand of applied, hands-on, practical experience that leads you to a career where you can make a good living. So all the final branding yet to be determined. I don't know, Regina, Louise, or Ellen, if you have anything more to add, but
Yeah, I'll just say that where we are in the process right now is that this is a proposal and a final report that's going to be handed to Pat, and that she and the Vermont State Colleges Board and others will make the decision of, do we accept this proposal or not? If it does, I think the intention of branding for a new program would be to show we still have this dairy program, but we're also making a much wider doorway that if you're interested in working in the food system in any way, there's going to be a way for you to come and get the education you need from Vermont Tech, whether through the associates or through short courses or other offerings that are going to be responsive to the food system as a whole.
Thank you.
All right, John, you're up, and then Chris.
Thank you, Carolyn, and thank you, Team VTC, for your great presentation. During your presentation, it made me reach for, of course, Ellen's big book here, and look through that. And I was just curious if there were discussions about, when you look at that book and you look at however many product briefs there are, how you would pick things like deep bedded hogs. I've never even heard of that expression, as opposed to, say, beer and spirits, or hemp and maybe THC cannabis, agroforestry, some of these other very hot agricultural products, and even more so on the issue side of things, all these things that are coming that I think will be very important, like PES and agritourism, even farm succession and access to BIPOC farmers. I know that's not very sexy if you're 18-year-olds thinking about, I'm going to get a degree in farm succession, but do you see VTC in the future being able to pivot to those sort of hot topics? Because ultimately you're selling yourself and you want to draw, from all over the country, especially from Vermont and Northern New England. But when you look at, what's working at Cornell, what's working in Durham and Orono, and using that to make VTC really the hot college. So I just wondered about your discussions on that.
Yeah, I'm really happy to speak to that, John. We address those large issues in two different ways. So I'm going to start with the transition, the being able to pivot, the BIPOC, those sorts of things. So what we started with were subject matter area experts, and we listed every single skill or knowledge base that we thought someone would need to be engaged in any form of agricultural production, processing, or technical services, anything that you needed. We ended up with pages. I believe we had 13 pages of skills that we recognized as essential. And so then we went through the VTC curriculum and said, you know what? The current curriculum is meeting those. And you're absolutely right, John. Trying to convince an 18-year-old that understanding depreciation is really cool is tough. But we realize that VTC, through many mechanisms, does have an opportunity to provide that to the students. We feel that the curriculum not only has the timely technical for today, but is bringing the students those critical thinking and lifelong learning skills, continue to gain those when they get to 30 years old and realize that, what they really wanted to know about was indeed depreciation. On the production side of it, we actually had over 23 different enterprises that we started with for consideration. And they range from actual production straight through to processing. So many really interesting processing opportunities as well. And we ran those through a rubric. And the rubric included, was it essential to teach these skills at an academic setting, at a farm? Is there more than one market access for these products in the case of actual products? Is there more than one buyer in the region? Or is there a robust market? Would learning skills associated with this production enterprise be transferable to other production enterprises? So we ran the 23 enterprises through that rubric, and that's what brought us to the 6 that you see. Now, we did realize that there's some opportunities here that we need to grow towards. You'll see that there's no value-added processing. There's no innovative marketing included in any of these opportunities that we've laid out. And we realized that for the short term, the 3 to 5 years, that frankly, the capacity and the capital to address that probably does not exist. So that also came into our selection, is what are the enterprises that can be addressed largely within the existing infrastructure at Vermont Tech, but will still provide students the essential skills. One that didn't make the list that we looked at every way from Sunday was how to keep dairy cows on the farm. We considered robotic milking, we considered value-added processing. And for the next 3 to 5 years, which is what this plan is looking at, is our next jump, we just couldn't see a way to continue to include that.
I'll just add briefly as well that another piece that we see as an opportunity is looking at short courses and some of the institute offerings that are already there. One thing I'll call out as an example is the Dairy Grazing Apprenticeship is a really well-known national program that looks at the next generation of dairy producers. They have 160 people on a list that are offering themselves as apprentices, many who are not being chosen because they have absolutely zero skills in dairy farming. So we're talking with them right now about offering a boot camp in the summer where those potential people could come, spend 2 weeks on an operation at the college campus, learning some very basic skills that would make them more marketable and also allow them to test out, is this the life I really want for myself? So I think looking beyond the associates to some of these other peripheral types of offerings that could also meet some of those diverse skills would also be possible.
Yeah, and I would just add that to your point, Representative O'Brien, we do a fair amount of that work now through our Ag Institute and more in the short course format that Regina's talking about. We've done brewing, we've done distilling, we've done hemp, we've done cannabis, a myriad. So in terms of can we pivot, the answer is yes. We can continue offer those short courses and see how many of those could have some stackable credential that could lead to certificate or potentially associate degree. But I think as Louise looked at it, it's where do you need that intensive college education? Where do you need to be on a farm or at a facility? And yes, I think it's currently our intent to continue to keep those operations open as capital enables itself for us to capture.
Thank you all for that answer. And we just have a few minutes left. I want to make sure that Chris Pearson gets his question or comment in. And Brian, I'm assuming that your hand is still up from before.
That is a correct assumption, Madam Chair. I'll lower it now.
Yeah, and Carolyn, we could run over a little if you need to get all the questions answered.
Sure, absolutely. We don't have anything till 10:15. I just didn't know if you were booked right after this, Bobby.
10:15, so.
Okay.
10:15, so we're good.
Okay, thanks. Go ahead, Chris.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. This has been a good conversation, and I want to build off of some of the last comments. I'm struck, in the afternoon, I serve in Senate Finance. We've been looking at broadband. I'm deeply interested in weatherization and food systems, sort of what we talk about a lot in the morning in my life. In every instance, workforce is an enormous question mark. And everybody says, well, VTC is going to handle this, right? Now, you have a great track record of graduating and earning money, right? That's a selling point. We have a moment in time here where rural life is kind of interesting. And so I want to ask a couple of questions along those lines. What are you doing? Like, what is the New York City outreach plan? In addition to taking care of our kids, I think there is a potential to lure people to rural parts of the country. And then, a lot of people go, certainly I'm more familiar with a 4-year program where I went to UVM. I didn't know what I was going to do when I enrolled. They made you pick a major. That lasted for me a few weeks, and I changed. And I feel like VTC is very programmed, like, you want to do this, come in here, we'll send you out here. And young people, I don't think, are there. And we have such a broad array of, the next decade's worth of workforce issues across, whether it's, stringing fiber optics, electricians, weatherization, all of this stuff, including food systems. So I don't know quite what the question is, but how are you dealing with that? And is there kind of an open gate? Come here if you want to be part of rural life and the workforce. Make a bunch of cash doing meaningful work in the next decade. Come to VTC. Can you just talk about that sort of? It's not a very pinpointed question, but maybe it makes sense.
Sure. I mean, we are constantly marketing out of state for that exact reason, Senator, of, come to where it's clean and green. And, there's no secret. I'm a UVM grad, and my first year in my English class, how many of you came here to ski? And everybody but me raised their hand. And so, there's that attraction, as well as our reputation as a clean, healthy, progressive state. So that helps. We are hindered in large part by our cost of tuition. We have other states that surround us that are able to offer a lower tuition. And I mean no disrespect at all, but because they get greater state support and have continued to get greater state support through the years. So we compete on that front. And then often some of those rural students get here and they look around and go, wow, where's the mall? Where's the this? Where's the that? And so we may lose them. On the flip side, we get students who go to larger institutions and say, no, I want a smaller, more rural, more homey community feeling, and they'll transfer here. So we do capture them, but there's a lot that goes into whether they end up coming and staying here. But clearly that's the intent. And to your other point around broadband, weatherization, et cetera, and well, let me go back for a minute. I mean, I'm also finding students that come to us, they're looking for a technical college experience. They're not like I was when I went to UVM, where I wasn't sure, thought I'd be a lawyer, who knew? And so I wanted a liberal arts college that could give me some places to go. Students that come here like, yeah, I want to take mechanical engineering. Yes, I want to go into nursing. Having said that, we have a pretty large population of undeclared students that come every year, and we help channel them in their correct direction. And our programs are pretty lockstep. We cram a lot into a 2 and a 4 year degree here, but the results show. So, and part of the new university will exactly give greater opportunity, if you will, for the students who might come in and say, maybe I do want to be a poli-sci major, like in my case, and then look over here and see these mechanical students or see these construction management students and say, ooh, that kind of looks better to me. So, but we are a technical college. We offer the technical programs, and then we do our whole continuing ed and workforce development division is all around things like broadband, weatherization. I mean, we're doing that every day. We're currently in conversations with the CUDs about lineman education, so we can get that broadband extension. We're constantly working with the CAPS and others on weatherization and other meaningful needs of the day in our workforce, but then also what needs to rise to that degree level. What could be certificate? What can be workshop? What can be certificate? What is associates, bachelor's, masters? And really, I mean, that's what we do. Vermont Tech's history is being responsive to the workforce needs. I mean, we built the engineering program on the interstate highway system. We built the ag program, as you saw in the presentation, when the Industrial Revolution, or the technical program when the Industrial Revolution took off. We built the ag program when there weren't enough ag degrees being awarded from the University of Vermont. So that's our gig, if you will. And yes, we'd love more out-of-state students because they come and they stay, a lot of them. But we're pretty happy to be educating our Vermonters too, because 78% of those folks stay in Vermont.
The other thing that I'll add too is that this is very much why we thought the center was really important. If you're a student of any kind or any age and you think, I kind of find food systems interesting, but I really don't know what I want to do. If you come in and you have somebody that meets you at the door to say, what do you find interesting? What do you like to do? What are your strengths? And to have them be able to help you pattern, this is a pathway forward towards some things you might find interesting, that's really a way to draw in all kinds of people who don't have the exact idea of where they're headed. And the other thing I found so interesting is Ellen shared a story during our process last summer with the pandemic raging and the inability to travel very far. Putney Student Travel made some alternative offerings to their usual international ones that you could send kids from high school age through early adult to. And so they had one for the Vermont food system that Castleton hosted. And Ellen, would you be willing to share what you saw during that experience?
Yeah, it was former Governor Peter Shumlin joined the conversation, and they invited me to come down and give a little talk about Vermont and our overall food system and production agriculture, and just answer their questions, because they were going around and having workshops at different area farms in the Rutland area. And, you know, all the kids, there was probably 20, 22 kids. They were all from downstate. They were all from outside New York City, or from New York City itself, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, Philadelphia area. And they all said, we were interested in coming to this program because we really are interested in these issues. And we know that Vermont is a place where that happens. And we were so excited to see all the farms that we would go to see. And they asked really, really good questions. A few of them had been in farm to school programs in their community, in their schools, but most of them didn't have farm to school programs. So this was totally fresh for them.
All right, thank you. I don't see any other hands. When I heard you say, and I'll just make this fairly quick because I know we are running out of time. But when I heard you say that you would be selling the dairy herd, it caused me a little agita. And I understand why Senator Starr feels concerned about that. But I also, then when you said that you could do internships on local farms, that made me feel a little bit better. And I'm wondering if you could say what the availability, I mean, I know there's goat farming that's happening, which we know we need more of. Could you say a little bit about how that would work?
Sure. And we did meet with a group of farms to ask them, hey, how would this work, to get their input? And we realized there's some hurdles we need to overcome, things as simple as housing and transportation for this. And so that would be part of the contracted position that we're discussing, is to hammer out those details. Vermont Tech does have a number of other programs where they have paid internships for students. So they have the basic structure in place for this. We just need to dig in and figure out the details for the students for this particular program. In addition to the 2 paid internship opportunities, we're also looking to develop what we're considering units. And this would be an opportunity for students to work with a specific farm, for example, for 3 afternoons a week for a month to learn a specific skill. And that wouldn't be a paid, we would probably be paying the business for that, providing that service to the student. So we realize that we do have a lot of the nitty-gritty details to figure out, but we're confident that Vermont Tech has the broad structure and that we'll have the staffing capability to really hammer that out over the next year.
So, and
And what we do know, oh, go ahead, Pat.
Oh, sorry, and I share your concern, Representative Partridge, and it caused me a little agita as well, in terms of, before we make that decision to get rid of the milking herd or not keep a small milking herd or some iteration, I want to have confidence that there are those farms who are willing to host students for the long term, and to understand what the issues that they may have, liability. I mean, you know, one of the things we experienced at Norwich Farm was we had students who weren't necessarily the world's greatest artificial inseminators, and they wanted the opportunity to learn more, but you had a private sector farmer who's paying the cost of the product to do the insemination, wanting the best students to do that. So do we have to compensate them for some supplies, things of that nature, recognizing that they're not in the business of providing education, but is exactly as Louise said, that this contract to get moving over the summer, if we can get funding in place, we'll be able to suss all that out and really get a sense and sign folks up, as well as other value-added producers and other opportunities for not just internships, for the units as Louise described.
Yeah,
Thanks.
the
And
only piece
Regina,
I'll-
do you want to go ahead, Regina? Sorry. to
Oh, sure.
interrupt.
Just no. Thank you very much. Just to add that the one thing that we do know is that any internship will be closely monitored. That there will be educational content goals that are expected. That we're not just going to stick them down there, hope they learn something, and hope for the best. That there will be assignments connected to it. So it isn't going to be a loosely oriented internship, but rather one that has specific expectations. And I think one of the interesting challenges for us, as well as everyone else, as we talk about what we're seeing in this vision program, is that we need to worry about internships for processing and manufacturing and logistics and social media and marketing, as much as we need to figure out farm internships, because if we really see 120 plus students in this program to make it really work and thrive, it's going to be probably those that have interest beyond producing food of some kind, and also looking to those other really essential pieces to add value to what's being produced here and then getting them to the marketplace. So it's going to be exciting and a big lift, but really feeling positively about the opportunities.
All right, I'm watching the clock, and I think that Vicky has her hand up. This has got to be the last question or comment, and then I think we need to break because we need to move on. But I want to say thank you so much to everybody for all of your hard work on this. In case I don't get a chance at the very end, Vicky, go ahead.
Thank you. I don't think this will be too long. And I just get so excited hearing about how you guys are all working so hard and innovating and really complex sometimes. Tell me real quick, fundraising can be challenging. And you mentioned it several times in the presentation. Is it a traditional send letters out to alumni kind of a thing? Or are there other ways that you're going to be fundraising?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's alumni for sure, but it's also foundations, philanthropy, grants. We'll probably be knocking on the legislature's door at some point, but it's really like any place we can go. I'm frankly hoping we could look at corporate sponsorship, be it equipment or something of that nature. We've toyed with that since I've been here. I don't know of past attempts, but it's going to be combing the earth, if you will, for funding, but really starting with philanthropy, grants, alumni. I mean, we've been talking with alumni and asking for giving a long time, and we do get some giving, but it's not always of a scale that like NVU and the $3.5 million from the president of Carhartt or things of that nature. But it's steady assistance in smaller amounts, which is great. But we're really going to have to step it up to really facilitate all this. And there are grants we're constantly going after. So, but yeah, that's what we're looking at. And I too just really want to thank you all very much for your time this morning, especially the extra time, your interest, and obviously lots to talk about as we move forward here, but really appreciate your feedback and your insights, and we'll be following up. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you all. Really appreciate it. And I'm sure, Bobby, did you want to say a few last words?
No, just that I want to thank the committee for their work. You can disagree and still not be disagreeable about it. So, but it'll be interesting to, analyze the proposal further. And thanks a lot for all the hours and days that you did spend putting this all together.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
and I want to thank you too. And this has been fun to have a joint meeting with Senate Agriculture and the House Ag and Forestry Committee. And just in terms of directions, I think Senate Ag is going to hop off. House Ag and Forestry is going to stay on this call. I'll give you all like a 3-minute break, and our next witness is here. So thank you. And Bobby.
Senate Ag could come back at 20. We'll take a 5-minute extension on our comeback. This committee and VTC has been doing a study on how to revamp the college and get it back on solid footing. And this morning was their presentation to both committees. So sorry that we're a little late, but we'll worked certainly to get you all in and through the process. I'd like to, I'm Bobby Starr and I chair the committee, and the full committee is here, so I'll let them introduce themselves.
Hi, Chris Pearson, Senator from the Chittenden District.
Brian Collmore from the Rutland District.
Corey Parent from Franklin County.
Yeah, and Anthony Polina, I don't know if he's having trouble with his voice or what, but Anthony Polina from Washington County is also a member of our committee. So this morning, we're going to take additional testimony in regards to S67. It's creating a right to repair agricultural equipment. And I've got a list of 5 people. I don't know if any of you have a particular time limit that you can be with us. And if you do, we'll try to get you in sooner. But Ward Butler is on the list at the top. And so if I haven't seen any hands up. So Ward, if you'd like to lead off and introduce yourself and
Yep.
who
How's
you
my audio?
represent.
Yep. Audio good?
Yeah, very good.
All right. Thank you, Senator Starr, for allowing us the opportunity to testify. My name is Ward Butler, and I'm the service manager for Milton Cat. And Milton Cat represents Caterpillar. We have several locations throughout New England and New York, local stores in Chittenden County in the town of Richmond. And we have anywhere from 40 to 45 employees, depending on the time of year. We did try to reach out to Senator Pearson, but we did not receive any calls back. We do have concerns about this bill. We live and work in Vermont. We strongly oppose the bill. We're most concerned with the safety, and that anyone can have access to embedded software codes. Currently, our customers have access through a diagnostic tool called Caterpillar ET. It gives them diagnostic codes and repair codes. It's available on a subscription basis, and it is updated routinely, annually, if not sooner, with technology and product updates. So we draw the line, however, at granting access beyond the firewall. We do not support anyone's right to access codes that allow tampering of codes that govern safety and emissions technology in the machines. The safety impacts are extremely serious. CAT machines are large and complicated, certainly dramatically different than small consumer electronics like a cell phone. So even a small amount of tampering, electronics or hydraulics in the machine could cause injury. Also, tampering with the engine can easily make the machine out of compliance with the EPA Clean Air Act. That liability concerns us, and the potential concerns would fall back on us, the dealer. We see this bill as the ability to grant access to anyone to tamper or alter the code. Future owners would have no idea that safety may have been compromised on their machines. They would have no idea that critical parts may have excessive wear because someone tried to make the machine do something beyond its safety or factory specifications. Milton Cat invests heavily in the industry. For example, our technicians receive on average 100 hours of training annually, which translates into thousands of dollars. We also have a long-term relationship with VTC, offering apprenticeships and scholarships. And our equipment, we equip our techs with expensive technology and service trucks that are available, all hours of the day. To summarize, we see this bill is seeking to fix a problem that we don't see exists. We are extremely concerned about the safety and emissions compliance that these issues arise. So again, I say we oppose the bill, and I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, Ward. Are there questions from committee members? Brian, Senator Collmore?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You mentioned subscription price, Ward. I'm just curious, how much does it cost to get that?
I believe the annual subscription is around $1,200.
And it's updated how often?
At least annually, if not more often. Depends on the product requirements, updates that we have with our product.
Thank you.
Other questions, Senator Pearson?
Yeah, thank you for coming in, and I apologize for not calling back. Some don't realize it in our system. Once the bill is in, it's in. You sort of lose control of it. So I hoped we would be able to have this conversation here. I'm curious that if somebody tampers with the emissions or with some of the safety requirements, that's not what the bill talks about. It talks about repair, not modification, right? So isn't that still today, or if we pass this bill, most of that's protected by federal law, is it not?
The EPA Clean Air Act, yeah, correct. Again, the concern would be what happens once this is, in someone's hands who's, seeking to do more than just repair, change the horsepower or something that affects the emission.
And what about the diagnostic tool is pricey, but admittedly available. But we're hearing a lot of the components after you replace maybe a filter or maybe something a little more intense than that, you have to be able to, as I understand it, communicate with the central computer of the machine. And is that something that consumers could get themselves, or is there also a subscription kind of model for that piece of?
Into the embedded software. And yes, most emissions problems do require our services. However, part of the requirement is extended warranty. And the emissions problems are covered for 5 years or 3,000 hours. But to answer your question, it would require us to be present.
Other questions? One issue that came up that when we very first took this bill up was that people would call for service, and the lag time between when they called and when the service truck got there was there was quite a lot of time lost, and so the question I have is what kind of a lag time do you have in general from when a customer calls and when they get the service?
Quite frankly, we haven't seen a lot of that. When we get the call, especially with the emissions, we're responding within a day or two, if not sooner. I have over 10 vehicles on the road ready to be dispatched on a daily basis. But quite frankly, we haven't seen it that long. We kind of pride ourselves on not allowing it to take that long.
Yeah. So it runs a day or so?
Yes, sir.
Because a lot of times, if you have a farmer and he's got hay down or crop down, and it can't sit there for 2 or 3 days waiting for the service truck to come, and So that was one issue that one farmer brought up in particular, was the lag time. Any other questions from committee? If not, thank you, Ward, for your time, and you're welcome to stay with us if you have the time. The next person I have on the list is Glenn Scott.
Hi. Yep, you've got me.
Yeah.
Hi,
Morning.
thank you, Senator, for the time. I also work for Milton Caterpillar, and I'm in the sales side of the business, and represent Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. And just to echo what Ward said, he put it in a nutshell. But our biggest concern here is the safety of the consumer at this point, because these temperatures inside the Tier 4 final run when they're regenning around 1,000 degrees. And so we're talking about something that's very, very serious. Some of the hydraulic pressures inside the engine are over 30,000 PSI. So our technicians are not even allowed to work on these machines until they've gone through an extensive training program. Ward doesn't let any of his technicians just jump on a machine and start working on it. They have to go through and meet certain criteria and get to a level where we feel comfortable that they're not going to hurt themselves or anyone else. So I guess what I wanted to just make sure is that the committee understands we put a lot of money and effort and training into our technicians so they're safe and the customer's safe. And so the thought of giving that ability to somebody that maybe have watched a YouTube video or gotten some type of information somewhere, that's a very serious thing for us. We really, again, don't want to see anybody get hurt and don't want to see anybody have any increased liability. So that's really all I had. I just want to echo what the board said on the safety side of things.
Yeah. Any questions for Glenn, Senator Collmore?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Glenn, since you're on the sales side and I worked for 45 years selling radio ads, so I'm kind of in a similar situation.
Right.
When somebody
Does
comes
your
in,
radio ads purr like a cat?
yeah. I'm curious when there's a customer in the showroom and they're, getting ready to sign a deal, how many of them take advantage of that subscription, and what's your sort of take on whether they see this as a problem that they can't sort of repair their own machinery? I'm probably not phrasing that in a totally objective way.
No, I understand. We see certainly the larger fleets take advantage of the electronic subscription because they have large fleets to manage. So we do. Ward can talk to that as well. We see that quite a bit. But to be honest with you, really what we find on our side of the business is there's a switch happening. Customers really don't want to work on their things anymore. They, much like I don't work on my pickup truck that I drive. I take it to the dealer and I have them do their stuff, and I think that the age of that is happening more and more. And in the construction side, we actually even sell packages where a customer can either do all his own work or he can have us do everything, even changing the oil. I mean, we have these agreements where we will take care of your machine from head to toe. We'll change the oil, we'll service it when it's down, we'll do everything you need to do and provide a rental when the machine is being worked on. So we really can encompass a whole different aspect of it that maybe a lot of people don't know. So I know that's a long answer to your question, but really there's different buckets that each customer fits into.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else for Glenn right now from the committee? If not, thanks, Glenn. And if you hang around and if you think of something else or a question comes up, just raise your hand like I'm doing and we'll get you back on. Michael, is Michael with us?
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
there you are. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Senators. Thank you very much for your time today. My name is Michael McKenna. I'm the Director of Aftermarket for United Ag and Turf in the Northeast. We are a 28 location John Deere dealer. We do have 4 locations in Vermont with Rutland, Middlebury, Heartland, and South Royalton. We have spoken many times in many different states in regards to this, and we are ultimately opposed to this legislation. We believe it is simply unnecessary. We have always and will continue to support our customers' right to repair their equipment. We do not support the right or the ability to modify their equipment. Parts, technical manuals, workshop manuals, diagnostic information, diagnostic software are all available to end users to work on their own equipment without needing access to any of the proprietary software systems, which this bill and many of the others that we've dealt with inadvertently allow. On the John Deere side, less than 2% of John Deere repairs actually require reprogramming of software. In regards to some of the questions that were actually already posed, and Glenn and Ward did an amazing job and had great information, but the software that's already available to consumers does allow recalibration, the help with the installations of parts, everything that's needed for the majority of consumer-based repairs, period. Reprogramming of the actual encoded software is limited to dealers, and very specifically because if consumers could modify their software, whether they mean to or not, they could potentially modify safety systems as well as emissions features and not even be aware of it. Safety could result in injury, could result in death, damage to property, damage to the equipment itself. And it's silly things like bypassing an operator presence switch in a seat. They may not realize that they've done it, and that could cause significant issues down the road. Bypassing emission systems could quite literally send a piece of equipment back more than 20 years in terms of environmental damage and pollutants. And that's part of the reason that we are opposed to this. We've been always strong advocates of a consumer's right to repair, just not the right to modify.
So you do, like, you're in John Deere, right?
Yes.
And if you buy a John Deere a certain program, you can rent or buy a program to do some things, did you say?
Yes, absolutely. The program actually lines up almost 100% with what we as dealers have available. There's a few things that are not available to the consumer, and it basically boils down to a literal modification of the base software within the systems.
Yeah.
But recalibration, which is indeed needed for some components, especially on the emission side, when you put, if you had to put new filters in for some of the diesel emissions, that does have to be recalibrated to machine. That is available in the consumer-based subscription versions.
Yeah. Are there questions from committee? Senator Pearson?
Thanks. Sorry, I had to hop off there. Ironically, I'm getting my car repaired. Not at the dealer, by the way.
Out in your dooryard?
Had to talk to the local mechanic down the road to see if he could sell me on a new oil pan. So you've all made it clear you're against modification.
Yes.
That's not contemplated in this bill, basically covered by federal law. You've also basically said this bill is not necessary. So then what's the harm of having this bill? If you're saying your consumers can do most of what they want to do already, that's what this bill's trying to do, is say, hey, I own this tractor, I can fix my tractor, I can bring it to a repair person that I trust. But you're sort of saying that they can do that, but you oppose the bill. I don't understand. Those can't both be true. If they can already do it, then this bill's not going to have much impact.
Does this bill speak to embedded code or other essential trade secrets, if you will, for the software?
No.
So the program that John Deere has, your mechanic down the street, Senator Pearson, could buy, or the owner of the equipment could buy through John Deere. But why couldn't they fix the whatever anyways then?
Well, that's what we're trying to uncover. The folks that we're talking to say they can't. The dealers and the repair folks say they can. So there is some kind of a disconnect here. The fact that this bill is being debated, some version of this bill is being debated around the world, would suggest there's more than just a few of us that are idly curious about it. So I don't own a farm. I'll be the first to say I don't have a lot of firsthand experience. I do own a car. I do own several cars. I do think there's a lot of parallels when you talk about the safety factors, the pollution factors, the regulators, the ability to mess with software. All of that is equally, if not more, applicable to cars, because there's millions and millions of cars hurtling down the road, putting the broad public in danger in a way that most farm equipment is not. And we have satisfactorily said, it's my car, I have the right to repair it, or I have the right to bring it to whomever I wish to bring to repair. And yet when we talk about a lot of other equipment, we don't make that same principle. That's what gets at me, and I struggle to make peace with that. But
So,
Michael?
yes, so ultimately, the reason that we remain opposed to this bill and believe it's unnecessary is because we already have everything out there. It's just an unnecessary law because we want this to exist. We want consumers to do this, to be able to repair their equipment. We've got education that definitely needs to take place because there is a disconnect at some point with what people believe is available. You absolutely have some folk that are taking their 40 or 50-year-old piece of equipment where it was mechanical, there were no emissions, there was no safety features, and they can easily fix that because it was a very simple repair. In order to be safe and be emissions compliant, there's a lot more that go into it. And that's why these systems, which are far more complex, require these additional tools. And that's absolutely an education point of view to our customers. That being said, to your point about your right to repair your car, you have speed limits on the road that you have to follow. Your car has certain things that it can and cannot do. Tractors, if you have the ability to reprogram, which I believe the bill actually does state reprogram, which is ultimately allowing changes to the embedded code, you could remove the speed controls in a system that would allow a huge tractor with a massive load that is driving down the road, from one farm piece to another to go faster than it should, to not be able to stop properly at an intersection. There's a lot of things that could happen that potentially cause issues, not just to the operators and to the equipment, but to innocent bypassers or other people traveling on the road. So there are safety concerns above and beyond just an individual on their farm.
Other questions for Michael? Not at this time. If not, thank you, Michael, and hope you can stay on. We got a couple more witnesses, at least one.
Thank you.
Gay Gordon, are you on or?
Yes, Senator, I'm on and I'm starting my video, so hopefully.
Oh, there you are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great.
Welcome.
I'm good to see all of you again. I wish I was there. It would be really a lot more fun to be in Montpelier.
Well, we aren't in Montpelier. I wish we were there too. We're
Okay.
all in our homes Zooming.
Oh, I know. It's good on the mileage and the dry cleaning bills, but other than that, it's difficult. Anyway,
Yes.
yeah, just so everybody knows, my name is Gay Gordon Byrne. I'm the executive director of the Repair Association. We are the group that is behind bills that are currently in 26 states, Vermont being one of those. And there's over 40 bills of various kinds, a number of which are specific to agriculture, just like yours. I can give you a quick update. Vermont is far from alone on this bill. We have already seen bills in other states that have moved through the Agriculture Committee and are headed to the floor. In Florida, if you think about how interesting it is that Vermont and Florida are both looking at the same bill, and they're very different states, and they're very different. You know, it's a Republican legislature in Florida and a Democrat legislature in Vermont. These things are meaningless on these bills. So Florida has moved their bill out of committee. Delaware, Missouri just advanced their bill. I think it was Tuesday. So things are moving, and these bills are not being stopped by the litany of safety concerns that you've just heard. What is really happening out there is that John Deere and Caterpillar and a number of members of the Association of Equipment Manufacturers made a promise back in 2018 that they were going to be repair friendly by January 1. And a lot of organizations, particularly in the Farm Bureau side, decided they would wait and see. And then January comes and nothing changed. And the reason nothing changed is that the sincerity of the manufacturers in terms of what they intended to provide to their customers is not what the customers expected. So probably the words that you should that picked up my hearing were words like most, less than 2%, majority, almost. These are all qualifications that say the farmer can't fix all of their stuff. And they've put limits out there and they call them modification, but really that's not what's going on at all. The farmer needs to be able to get the authentic firmware from the manufacturer and have it applied to their machine. They don't need to modify anything. They just need to be able to get it. And that's where these things are falling apart, because manufacturers like Deere and like Cat and like a number of other manufacturers have said, we're not going to provide that. We're going to draw the line. And that's why you're hearing these words that are very equivocal that say almost. Well, the farmer paid 100%. The farmer owns the machine 100%. They are responsible for their own safety 100%. If they can't fix their stuff because the manufacturer has decreed that they can't do this or that, they still can't fix their stuff. They're still dependent on the dealership. Not that the dealership is a bad guy, but they can't go around the dealership. They can't support themselves. They are totally, basically married to that brand and married to the dealership without the benefit of, let's call it a prenup. So they're stuck. And the only thing this bill does is it erases that marriage. It says, you can do everything you currently do, Mr. Dealer. You can provide the best service in the world, but you can't be the only source. That's what this bill does. There's nothing in the bill that says anything about trade secrets. In fact, trade secrets are specifically exempted because, frankly, nobody needs them. There's nothing that a manufacturer would call a trade secret that would even be in service documentation, because it would never be a secret if it's already distributed. Same thing with cybersecurity, same thing with, yeah, these things are big and heavy, but it's the computer that needs to be fixed. And I'm from the computer world, and I can tell you fixing computers isn't based on size, cost, or complexity. You basically have to get the tools from the manufacturer. You've got to get the diagnostics from the manufacturer. In most cases, you have to get the parts from the manufacturer. So everything that the manufacturer is providing is exactly what they've already provided. So there's no patent infringement, there's no copyright infringement, there's no trade secret infringement. All there is the end of that monopoly. So happy to answer questions. I'm pretty close to the bill. Definitely a resource if you care to use
it. Questions from committee? Ward or Michael, do you have any questions on well, we have Senator Pearson with a question.
Well, Go ahead and see if the other guests have questions.
No, Michael? No? Do you have any question? No?
No, not at this time.
Yeah. Go ahead, Senator Pearson.
Thank you. Gay, thanks for joining us. So can you just sort of review, this is our job, is to take conflicting testimony and try to figure out, what's what. But there's the diagnostic piece. And we've heard consistently from all brands that those are available. People can buy them. Is it true that they can buy them? Are they readily available? Are they prohibitively expensive? What is your experience or your understanding?
Our experience is that when people call up to try to buy the tools, a lot of the dealers don't know that they have them available. That's definitely a communications problem. Either people are making announcements about stuff that exists and they don't communicate how to sell it to the dealership, or the dealership. That's really not what this bill is about. But yes, there's a variety of answers to that question, even within the same brand. What one person regards as prohibitive pricing is probably reasonable to somebody else. So the bill doesn't really say anything other than fair and reasonable, because that's going to vary obviously by product. It might be fair and reasonable to spend $1,000 a year on a tractor that costs, or a piece of equipment that costs $500,000, and completely unreasonable if that equipment costs $10,000. So that's also not in the bill. And there was another point you asked, and I've already lost track. What was that again?
No, that's pretty good. And then the modification, I'd like your help understanding that, because I'm sort of appreciative that Ward sells me a piece of equipment, then I think I know what I'm doing. I inadvertently modify it, and then I bring it back to him, and he's got to clean up my mess. I mean, that does happen in any number of things. I'm allowed to work on the plumbing in my house, but it's going to cost me more because I don't know what I'm doing, and then the plumber is going to come, right? There is a safety impact because these are heavy pieces of equipment, but I don't think the bill deals with that. As I understand it, the safety issues and the emission issues it's illegal to modify those based on EPA and others. But can you just help us understand, that's been presented as a pretty clear drawback here. And what's your take?
My take is that when you're the owner, you are legally responsible. And if you look at the contracts that you sign when you buy a big piece of equipment, it says very, very clearly that I, John Deere or Caterpillar, or name a brand, am not responsible. There's a huge amount of legal disclaimers that go into these documents because the manufacturer does not want to be responsible for your messes. Now, when you mess up your own plumbing and you call the plumber, you pay the plumber. If you mess up your own tractor and you call the dealer, you have to pay the dealer. These warranties are actually very short unless somebody pays for an extended warranty, which is not a requirement. So yeah, it's a revenue opportunity for the dealer for you to mess up your own stuff. You are responsible quite literally for all your own accidents. You are responsible for liability. You are responsible for any of the speed limits that might exist on local roads. All of these responsibilities belong to the farmer, and they don't belong to the dealer. And they definitely don't belong to the OEM. So even on the emissions side, which is really not part of this bill at all, because hacking off your emissions is illegal. Farmers do get fined if they're out of compliance. Dealers get fined if they help people hack the software. And OEMs get fined if they fail to deliver a product that includes Tier 4. But it doesn't make the dealer the EPA police. So farmers are doing this. Frankly, they're doing it quite a lot because it's very expensive. But that's not what this bill does. This bill has nothing to do with emissions, and it has nothing to do with modding any software, because that's also copyright law. The Copyright Office told farmers starting in 2015 that they can mod, chip, hack, they can do whatever they want to the software on their tractors, so long as they stay legal. This has been copyright law since 2015. So this bill doesn't touch it because it isn't something the state can do. You've got to keep with what copyright law allows, what the EPA allows, what any other regulations allow. Your speed limits are still speed limits. There's nothing that changes, if that helps.
You mentioned other states are looking at this, and one of the impossible things to understand is the impact on our economy. I mean, I believe Ward works hard, and I hope he earns a decent living. And I don't mean to casually threaten their business, not in the slightest. I also think there are other people who could start a business or grow a business if there was a little more access. And this is a tension point. Do we have any way of knowing that, or has that been part of the discussion in other states that you've been a part of?
Well, farmers in other states have been very clear that every delay that they have on repair costs them a fortune.
Right.
And because everybody is generally trying, maybe not so much in Vermont, which is, as far as I can tell, mostly dairy, but in areas where everybody's out planting and harvesting at the same time, these delays become literally their business. Their business dies if they can't get their stuff fixed in a timely manner. So there's huge consequences for the farmer. Dealers generally don't have enough staff to cover every requirement at peak times because they can't afford to staff for peak times. They have to staff for routine business. Having the farmers be able to be a little bit more self-reliant is definitely an opportunity for employment at the direction of the farmer. I mean, a lot of these farmers are very sophisticated. They have staff, they have techs. Some of them have kids that are pretty tech savvy. These people are the ones that can come into the future and help grow agriculture as a business. It's been our experience with the automotive right to repair as well that although there was a lot of fear and doom and gloom and, oh my God, dealerships are going to die and we're going to lose all these jobs, it didn't happen. People like you, people like me, I make the decision depending on what's going on with my car, whether or not I want to take it to the dealership or whether or not I think that Randy down at my local mechanic would be a better choice of service. So I think most people do understand the difference between the dealership, which has a huge marketing advantage, and an independent repair. And they're quite able to do that for most of their other purchases. For some reason, I was astonished to hear somebody say that people don't want to fix their stuff anymore. I'm like, that is definitely not the message I'm hearing. I'm hearing people are desperate to fix it. And it's not just farm equipment. They're desperate to fix their TVs and their washing machines and their cell phones too.
Yeah. Super. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions for Gay? The only thing I would say, Gay, is I've been was in the trucking business my entire adult life until I got smart and retired. But back in the 60s and 70s and 80s and way up until recently, you could train yourself to work on those engines and transmissions. A decent mechanic could do it. But my son and grandson are in that business now, of course, with up-to-date new trucks. And hell, you open that hood and I mean, you don't know where to begin because it's so packed full of computer boxes and wiring. And I mean, I can't imagine a farmer. I mean, if you had a big operation where you could have a full-time mechanic, yes, they could go to school and get trained, but a typical regular farmer with, a hired hand or two, I mean, I would think they would want to call Milton Cat if they had a Cat or John Deere if they had a John Deere. I mean, their trucks, they buy extended warranty, and when that truck gets to 400,000 miles, it goes to some lucky owner and a new one takes its place because of, all the things that can go wrong on the boys' trucks. But anyways, just a quick note.
It's funny that you
How
mentioned trucks because,
things have really changed.
well, it's not so much as they've changed, but you might be interested to know that Cummins, who provides engines for a lot of trucks as well as agricultural equipment, makes all of their software readily available without having to jump through any hoops for trucks and for off-road versions. So there's definitely a disconnect between what you can do particularly as a fleet owner in a truck. And there is a agreement. It's the extension of the automotive right to repair agreement. It was done by the commercial vehicle group in 2015. So the information to fix a truck is out there in the same manner that you can use a independent mechanic for a car. So I agree. It's probably, I wouldn't try to fix it, but other people do. Seriously, other people do. And it's the option that has been missing in agriculture. And we just need to restore the option.
There any other questions for Gay?
I see Michael has been waiting.
Well, I didn't have as much.
He put his yellow hand up. I don't see those. Go ahead, Michael.
I didn't have as much of a question as just some comments in regards to some of what Gay said, and ultimately, I think that Ward and Glenn would also agree. Is yes, at the dealership level, we struggle to get capacity for our technicians, and it's not from lack of desire and not from lack of resources. It's a massive industry, and there's a massive amount of competition, and we spend a huge amount of money and resources to try to get technicians from anywhere that we possibly can. We put them through school. We have tuition reimbursement programs for school. You're from Vermont. I'm sure you've heard of, Cobleskill, Southern University of New York, Cobleskill. We have a lot of people that go through that program. We have a lot of students in our shops. As far as people using the John Deere programs that are not employees, I have one individual out of Connecticut. His name's Charles. He went to Cobleskill. He worked at one of our dealerships. He went out on his own. He purchases the subscription for the program. He has the ability to go out and do everything he needs to. Not having that additional access to the exact same software the dealer has, which I'm trying to remember everything that the bill said, and I apologize that I didn't remember it off the top of my head, but it says, I believe the bill says same access to software as the dealer. That gives anybody the access to flash or reprogram, which is where the issues come into with safety and with emissions modifications. This particular technician, on the road technician, Charles, down in Connecticut, has the consumer-based software and has no issue fixing, has not had any issues fixing anything. He buys a huge amount of parts from our store in Canaan, Connecticut, and he's out there doing it all the time. We do not have complaints or issues. He's just doing it. To speak to this bill in other states and in other chambers, I believe this bill has been, or a variation of this bill has been up about 100 times in 40 or so given states. I do not believe it is passed in any of them at this time. Manufacturers are providing this. And yes, there's education that needs to take place, both from the consumer and from the dealership levels. I don't think anybody would argue with that. We're just arguing with that ability to modify the equipment and to cause damage and issues, period.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. I'm wondering, Gail, is Keith Gray, is he on the line or showed up?
He was on, and then it looks like he's dropped. I know that he had a doctor's appointment, so I'm not sure if he'll be rejoining us.
Yeah. Are there other questions from the committee members? No. Gail, did you have anything else to present to the committee? Gay?
Oh, yeah, I didn't know if there was someone else on. I sent over.
Keith couldn't make it or something.
Okay. I sent some materials up to Linda last night that hopefully she's been able to circulate. One of them is a description of the gory details of just what they're talking about for the payload files, otherwise known as flash files. I think what it really comes down to in all cases is who owns the equipment. If the farmer owns the equipment, all of these issues are essentially none of the business of the dealer. The farmer can make their own mistakes. They can drive their tractor off a cliff. They might actually exceed the speed limit on a local road, but these are not problems that hurt the dealer. They don't hurt the OEM, they hurt the farmer. So I think we have to take the position that the farmer is in control of their equipment and that there's no good reason that he shouldn't be in control of the equipment, even if we assume that farmers are dumb, which is a terrible assumption. And I think it's very insulting to have the dealers say, well, you can't possibly fix that stuff because you haven't gone to school, when the schools aren't turning out candidates because there's no employment. It's the whole training thing is a definite problem. And I would think that places like SUNY Copelskill and maybe in Vermont, if there is the opportunity to get more training, that those would be the places that you should be investing in terms of helping agriculture.
Thank you. So anything else from the committee? Any other questions for our witnesses that we have on? If not, want to thank you all and Ward and Michael and Gay. You know, I don't know if we'll have another hearing. You know, we have requests come in, of course, for people that want to be heard. Keith Gray we still haven't gotten him in yet, but maybe he'll come back later this morning and punch in. But we'll end this portion of our meeting, and again, thanks a lot for being with us.